I think now more than ever, we ought to be finding ways we could actually come together.
Sir, we're going to get
and
to
this kind of action by the Department of Justice, I think, would only fuel further division in the country. And let me also say, I think it would also send a terrible message to the wider world. I mean, we're the emblem of democracy. We're the symbol of justice in the world. And the serious matter, which has already happened once in New York, of indicting a former president of the United States, sends a terrible message to the world. I hope the DOJ thinks better of it and resolves these issues without an indictment.
Sir, I just want to clarify. What you're saying is that if they believe he committed a crime, they should not go forward with an indictment? You just talked before about committing to the rule of law.
Let me be clear that no one's above the law.
Okay.
But with regard to the unique circumstances here, look, I had no business having classified documents in my residence, and I took full responsibility for it. President Biden had no business having them in his residence from when he was vice president as well. And the same with former President Trump. But I would just hope that there would be a way for them to move forward without the dramatic and drastic and divisive step of indicting a former president of the United States. We've got to find a way to move our country forward and restore confidence in equal treatment under the law in this country. We really do.
That was former Vice President and human whiplash Mike Pence explaining how we have to have the rule of law, but also how it shouldn't apply to Trump, but also how no one is above the law, but also how in this particular instance he should be, but also how he needs to stand up for equal justice, but also that we can't do that by holding someone accountable for their crimes. Make sense? Didn't think so. So let's try to make some sense of a response so tortured, George W. Bush looked at it and got jealous. First off, Mike Pence says that any indictment by the DOJ against Trump would only further fuel division. But here's the thing. Who cares? The Justice Department doesn't operate based on how divisive or well-received their indictments would be. They follow the law. Their mandate isn't equal justice, except when some people get mad. It's just equal justice. What's amazing, too, is that this is one of the former leaders of the Republican Party, a party that quite literally brands itself the party of law and order, only to now come out and suggest that we should only have law and order when it's not divisive. It's almost like, and bear with me on this one, law and order was nothing more than empty branding the Republicans hid behind to pander to their base. Pence then goes on to suggest that indicting Trump for committing crimes would send a terrible message to the world. Why? Because apparently we are the symbol of democracy and justice to the world, and so clearly, as the preeminent symbol of justice to the international community, think about how the rest of the world would perceive us taking a radical step like holding a criminal accountable for his crimes. I mean, what's next? Arresting thieves? Prosecuting homicides? Jailing arsonists? I'm sorry, but I just don't see how we could allow justice to happen in a country that purports to value justice. Pence then goes on to say this.
Let me be clear that no one's above the law.
Okay.
But with regard to the unique circumstances here,
because nothing says commitment to equal justice quite like the phrase, no one is above the law, but. For those who don't speak bullshit, what Pence is trying to say is that no one is above the law except when they are. And in this case, he thinks Donald Trump should be. And you can see how uncomfortable he is while he's saying this, which is likely owed to the fact that it quite literally makes zero sense. The guy is contorting himself into a human pretzel and he knows it, but instead of having an ounce of dignity, he's opting to just not. And of course, when in doubt, try some whataboutism. Pence attempts to promote this false equivalency wherein he compares what he himself and Biden did to what Trump did. And it's true that all of those people, among many others, did mishandle classified documents. But that's where the similarities end, because Pence and Biden both did the right thing when it was revealed that they had classified documents, which was to voluntarily surrender those documents to the National Archives and invite law enforcement to sweep their homes and offices to find any other materials. But what Trump opted to do was to ignore a subpoena from the National Archives for more than a year, have his attorney attest falsely that all the documents had been returned when they hadn't, eventually necessitate a federal magistrate to sign off on a search warrant, which the FBI executed only to reveal all of the documents that Trump had previously pretended were returned. And that's to say nothing of a slew of reporting suggesting further alleged efforts to obstruct justice, perhaps by flooding a pool in the video surveillance room at Mar-a-Lago, perhaps by running dress rehearsals, perhaps by moving boxes just prior to the FBI visiting and on and on. All of which is to say, no, despite Mike Pence's very, very pathetic claims to the contrary, these things are not the same. And I would add, if he really thought that they were equivalent, then why didn't he himself do exactly what Trump did? Why not retain those documents in opposition to requests and subpoenas? Why not have his lawyers attest that everything had been returned when it hadn't? Was it maybe, just maybe, because Mike Pence actually knows that the two approaches are not the same and that doing these things was illegal and that he didn't want the legal exposure? Because I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that, yeah, Pence very clearly knows the difference, and his own actions are irrefutable proof of that. But here's my favorite line of the entire response.
We've got to find a way to move our country forward and restore confidence in equal treatment under the law in this country.
He literally explains that we have to find a way to move forward without indicting Trump for his crimes and restore confidence in equal treatment under the law. Like, what? Am I living in the Twilight Zone here? If you do the first thing, then you inherently cannot do the second thing. You don't get to put Trump above the law, but then hold that up as an example of equal treatment under the law. I don't know if Mike Pence is that dense or if he just thinks his audience is, but either way, not exactly a home run on the whole logic front. And what's most pathetic is that Pence is very clearly doing all of this to try to curry some favor within his party, a party that was perfectly willing to see him hanged as retribution for not bending to Trump's will and anointing him the winner of an election that he lost. The idea that Pence has a lane in that party is almost as ridiculous as his whole let Trump walk free as a way to preserve equal justice routine. And yet still he's out there stringing together whatever combination of meaningless words he thinks might be passable. The idea that the GOP stands for anything beyond their own pursuit of power is just laughable at this point. But still Mike Pence will try, and in doing so, by virtue of just being yet another member of a very crowded Republican field, he's actually doing his part to ensure that Trump does become the next Republican nominee. And of course Trump himself knows that, which is why he refuses to attack Mike Pence. Not exactly the stance of someone who's threatened by his entrance in the race. Because again, he knows that the more people that there are to fracture the anti-Trump vote, the more certain it is that Trump himself will cruise to victory by virtue of consolidating that 30 to 40% of Republican primary voters who do support him. So just like Pence is acting as a tool for Donald Trump in this town hall, he's also acting as a tool for Donald Trump just by virtue of being in this race. So look, we can't say for sure what's going to happen in this race, but what's already clear is that Republicans are putting on full display the extent to which they will traffic in outright absurdity while performing the impossible task of running against Trump and attempting not to abandon his supporters, all the while somehow figuring out how to both compliment him while still making a case that he shouldn't be the nominee. Although I would argue that that's only an issue now because Republicans opted to treat him as a king in the first place. Meaning if they're looking for an excuse as to why that they're in this position, they might want to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.